Good afternoon. I welcome you all to the session of experimental methods in fluid mechanics, and today we will discuss about the statistical analysis of the experimental data. Now, this is an important module of this course, and if we try to recall, we have discussed several modules in this course, and we have discussed about the experimental methods, in fact the operational principle of different instruments, and of course while using those instruments what are the precautions we need to consider, and finally that which is important, that dynamic response consideration. That means if we are using any instrument or device or any system in measuring fluid, I can say flow parameters. That means since the course is on the experimental methods in fluid mechanics, that is why I am focusing on the measurement of flow parameter. In fact, we have discussed about several modules, and in those modules we have discussed the measurement methods, working principle of several instruments which are used to measure velocity, pressure, temperature. So, and in the context of this we have also seen why we need to why you need to look at the dynamic response consideration, and we have seen the effect of the transient response, and through the mathematical analysis by considering an example we have seen how we can really design and why we need to model that, and from the analysis we have seen that the from this exercise we can modify the design consideration so that the effect or issues which are associated with the transient response will be addressed. Now, this is an important module, as I said. This is not only for the experimental data which we will be obtaining from the fluid flow analysis, but in general this module is very important for the experimentalist. That means whenever we are doing experiment, we are collecting data, we are recording data, and then the collected or recorded data should be analyzed, and why you need to go for the statistical analysis, that is very important. So, before I go to discuss this aspect, one question that I would like to address over here is that why we need to go for experimentations. That means why we perform experiments. So, this is very important question. So, I am writing that why we perform experiments. So, this is an important question. If we know the reason behind doing experiments, then perhaps we will be in a position to address the requirement of statistical analysis of the experimental data. So, why do we perform experiments? There are I am writing that there are a few objectives rather, and if we need to know, if we need to fulfill those, we need to go for, rather we should do experiments. So, the first answer is number 1. So, if I write the answer, number 1, why do experiments? We do experiments to obtain the value of a physical variable. right. Number 2, so the first objective is to obtain the value of a physical variable. If you would like to obtain the value of a physical variable, then of course we need to go for the experimentation. That means, if I give you an example, say we are interested in measuring the pressure. So that means, if we need to know the pressure of the so when our fluid is flowing through a fluidic confinement, then what is the pressure? So physical variable, that I mean pressure, velocity, temperature, these are the physical variables by which we can specify. So when a particular fluid is flowing through a pipe, then that is a flow condition. The flow condition will be specified by some variables, like what is the velocity of the flow, what is the pressure inside the flow domain, inside the domain, what is the temperature of the fluid. So we need to specify, we need to know the physical variable. So if we need to know what is the velocity, what is the pressure and what is the temperature of the fluid, temperature of the fluid, pressure of the flow inside the domain, and of course the flow velocity, then we need to go for the experiments. So this is what to obtain the value of a physical variable. Number 2 is to obtain an understanding of how some process or device works. So this is the second objective. That means to obtain an understanding of how some process or device works. That means if we do not do experiments, we won't be in a position to know the working principle of a process or device. That means if we say, if we now go back to the previous classes, then I mean the discussion of my previous classes, then we will be able to recall that pressure measuring device, a temperature measuring instrument, or if we would like to measure the flow velocity, then the working principle is very important. That means to obtain the understanding the process working principle of a particular device, and for that we need to go for the experiments. So we do not know a priori. Say if we consider the pressure measurement, we have seen that we need to take a tapping, and from that tapping pressure transducer is connected through a tube, and then then only we can measure the pressure. So now when we are planning, when we are trying to measure pressure using this pressure transducer through this connection, rather this system, so how we can measure pressure, only we will be in a position to understand if we do the experiments. So that is to understand, to have an understanding of how some device or process works. And number 3, is to verify a proposed theory. This is another important point. That means if we, I mean those who are doing theoretical work, theoretical research, so when they are proposing any relationship, proposing any theory, then whether the proposed theory is correct one to predict the flow parameters. If I talk about the fluid mechanics domain of the fluid mechanics, then the proposed theory is, whether the proposed theory is able to predict the data correctly or not, whether the proposed theory can predict the physical variable correctly or not, we need to certify, we need to verify. Then what we can do, we need to go for the experiments. So by measuring the physical variables or the data through the experimental process, through the experimental technique, we can obtain, we can verify the theory which is proposed. So, this is another important topic. And finally, which is very important is that to certify the safety of the device. Safety of a device. So, these four are the important. So, to certify the safety of a device, how can certify? That means if we talk about the manufacturing unit, say if we consider manufacturing company is producing one product, and before the product is used for the practical applications, we need to certify what will be the range of the measurement. Say we are consider the manufacturing company is producing one pressure vessel, and if the pressure vessel is used in real life applications, then we need to specify what is the internal pressure range for which the pressure vessel will be safe. That means the inside pressure, what will be the strength of the inside pressure that the pressure vessel can stand without any problem, and how we can certify that? That means we need to certify the safety of a device, that the pressure vessel should work if the internal pressure is from within this range. That means, and that we can know only by doing experiments. So, this is another important point. So, these four important points are the reason behind doing experiments, and that is why we are learning this throughout this course, the experimental methods in fluid mechanics. So, now if we write that the results of these experiments will be either a numerical value or curve or a statement we can make. So, the results of these experiments will be either a numerical value. So, if we do experiments, we will get either a value or a curve or a statement that what we can make. So, the objective behind doing experiments we have done. Now, if we do experiments, we have seen that these are the different objectives, and to satisfy or to fulfill these objectives we need to go for the experimentations. And now, if we do experiment, that is what I have written just now, that the results of these experiments will be either a numerical value or data, or a curve, or sometimes a statement that we can make. Now, when we are getting data or we are recording data from the experiments, then we need to go for the statistical analysis, because if we do not go for the statistical analysis, then we are not sure whether the data that is recorded, or sometimes we need, as I said, that if we try to have a plot, a curve, then accumulating all the data which are being recorded or which are already recorded may not be possible. So, we need to go for the statistical analysis. If I give you an example, say you are doing experiments, and if we do experiments, we can collect a few number of data. Now, question is, all the data if we use to generate a curve or plot, then all the data cannot be accumulated in a single line if it is a straight curve. Now, that means what I would like to say, a few data points will be outside the curve, or now it will, if we will discuss that, it is seen that most of the data will be outside the curve, and then we need to consider that should we ignore all the data which are outside the curve, or we should not ignore all the data, and if we need to ignore, then what are the data we will be ignoring. So, that means all the data should not be ignored to obtain the curve, or even if when we are getting curve, since we have collected all the data throughout from the experiments, and then while generating a curve or a plot, or we are developing a plot, then a few data points will be ignored, and which are the data set should be ignored from the measured value, and for that we need to go for the statistical analysis. That means we should have sufficient basis for which we can ignore a few data points which are obtained or recorded from the experiments, and the basis by which we can ignore the data point is the statistical analysis. That means we should have sufficient logic, sufficient argument to reject the data. Now, just I would like to give you another example. Suppose a manufacturing unit or a product, production plant is there, and that manufacturing unit is developing a plastic. So, just I am writing an example. So, say a production unit, and this production unit is developing a new plastic. So, when a particular product is developed from a unit, so from a manufacturing unit, then this new plastic which is developed, which is produced from the plant, why we are now trying to develop a new plastic. So, the objective is that from the manufacturing unit, when we are trying to go for a new product, then obviously we should have our planned objectives, and only for that we are planning to have a new product. So, the objective is that if it is a new plastic, that means we are trying to have I can say different electrical, mechanical and thermal properties. That means when we are looking for a new plastic, and if that plastic is used as the insulating material, then definitely we are looking for different electrical, mechanical and thermal properties. So, our objective behind the development of a new plastic is to ensure that the new product should have different properties. It may be electrical or it may be mechanical. So, the objective is completely different. That means the objective is to develop a new product. So, whenever any production unit or any manufacturing plant is developing new product, there is, or I can say the sole objective is to ensure that the properties should be changed. Now, that means these properties that we are looking for. Now, once the plastic is developed, then we need to measure, otherwise we cannot ensure. So, we need to go for the experiments. That means our objective was to have different electrical, mechanical and thermal properties. The product is produced. Now, we need to measure whether the properties which we are looking for is really there in the new product or not. So, that means we need to go for measurement. So, we would want to know these properties. Right. Now, when we talk about new properties, then these properties I am writing now, then I will explain. These properties are required empirical inputs to any type of design. That means these properties are required empirical inputs to any type of design. So, when the new plastic is developed, our objective is to obtain different properties. So, the design, that means these properties, say if we are looking for the new electrical properties, definitely the property, the different, I mean the new electrical property will be required and empirical inputs to the new type of design. So, now if I go to the next slide, say we are looking for the ultimate, say we are looking for the ultimate strength, mechanical property. So, this is the mechanical property. So, we are looking for the ultimate strength. Now, our objective will be to ensure that the ultimate mechanical property, that is the ultimate strength, will be different, and the new strength will be there in the new plastic which is being developed. So, say this is a production unit, there will be batch production, and if we consider 100 different sample, say we are considering 100 different samples, and if we consider 100 different samples, because we need to ensure that the product which is being developed from the manufacturing unit will have new ultimate strength, but before the product goes to the market for the practical applications, we need to certify that the product is having new ultimate strength, and to certify that we need to do experiments. That is what I was talking about. And if we take 100 different samples randomly, if we take 100 different samples from this manufacturing unit, and if we measure the ultimate strength using mechanical system or device. So, if we measure the ultimate strength of the sample, what we will get ultimate strength. So, this is our common experience. So, from our common experience we can say that if we take 100 different samples and if we measure the ultimate strength of all 100 samples, we will certainly get 100 different values of the ultimate strength. This is quite normal. We may get, I mean maybe we may get equal value of 2 different samples or 3 different samples, but it is our it is expected and it is our experience that we will get 100 different values of measured ultimate strength. Why we are getting so? So, this is very important question. So, if we consider 100 different samples and if we measure the ultimate strength, from our experience we can say that we will get 100 different values of measured ultimate strength. Why you are getting so? So, now why we will get? There are two main reasons. there are two main reasons for this. Number one, so we will get, rather we have seen this is not our expectation, rather we will get it. So, we will get 100 different values of the measured ultimate strength because of two different reasons. What are those? Number one is sample variability, which is very important because I will discuss this issue, and number two is the measurement error. So, we have seen that there are two different reasons for which we will get different values. One is the sample variability, other is the measurement error. Measurement error, that will be there because we cannot eliminate it, but other important reason is the sample variability. What is this? So, if we now consider this point, which is important, that regardless of the source of the variability, so sample variability, so maybe the product plastic which is being produced, which is developed, will have, I mean, if we take sample, so sample within a particular plastic may not be equal. So, sample variability will be there, because of what we may get different values of the measured ultimate strength, but regardless of the source of sample variability, we would be compelled to describe it So, we know that there will be the source of variability, sample variability. Knowing that, or regardless of the source of variability, would be able to compel to describe it, and if you would like to describe it, we need to go for the statistical analysis. So, and describe it, and the description of variability requires the use of statistical analysis. So, this is important. That means, again I am repeating, if we take 100 samples randomly, if we measure the ultimate strength, we will get 100 different values. Two different reasons, that if we take two different plastic samples, maybe the sample variability will be there, the composition may not be equal. Now, sample variability will definitely leads to the different values of the ultimate strength. On the other hand, we might have the measurement error. Measurement error will be discussing, and for that we need to go for the statistical analysis. That is what I was talking about, that if we get 100 values won't be the correct one. So, some data will be significantly or distinctly different from the other data points. But when we talk about sample variability, regardless of the source of sample variability, we even if we know that there will be sample variability, we would be compelled to describe it. We will be describe it what? We would be compelled to describe the why the different values of uncertain measurement strength we are getting, and for that, if we need to describe it, and for that description of variability requires the understanding or the analysis of the or the use of the statistical analysis. So, with this I stop my discussion today, and we will continue our discussion in the next class. Thank you.